Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us in discussing the future of a multi-cloud approach in streamlining supply chain operations and thriving on rapid change. I am joined by Pluto 7's very own CTO, Prashant Dhingra, who brings over 25 years of experience in building transformative machine learning and analytics solutions and has an extensive understanding of the current market and future trends. So Prashant, if you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit.
Thanks a lot, Shweta. I'm very glad to be here. I've worked for 29 years in IT industry. I worked at Microsoft, I worked at Google, I was managing director at JP Morgan Chase, and now I'm working at Pluto 7 to build intelligent supply chain platform.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much, Prashant. So just to set the stage a little bit, we're just going to ask Prashant, based on his expertise, his perspective on the growing changes that we're noticing in supply chain, especially more targeted towards a multi-cloud approach. So as we're all aware, that scattered market visibility and spreadsheets is making responding to market change very problematic and very complex. So Prashant, how do you see a multi-cloud strategy in helping alleviate some of these challenges for more streamlined operations?
Yeah, so first of all, we need to understand how multi-cloud is evolving in an organic manner. So supply chain is a complex environment. Defining, building, and deploying a digital supply chain across enterprises that are in multiple regions require an enterprise having an end-to-end roadmap. And it is very hard for enterprise to have end-to-end roadmap for all the component of a supply chain. So most companies doesn't have an end-to-end roadmap, and that's the reason they end up having fragmented solution. Some companies have a solution in demand sensing, but they may not have it in the inventory forecasting. So there are gaps between the solution. And even if companies have end-to-end roadmap, while execution, few things get delivered, few things doesn't get delivered, and it causes gaps. And then the individual business team end up buying pre-built solution in the market they're running into. So as a result, they have a different solution built by different vendors, and they exist on multiple cloud. And that brings the challenge of running a multiple cloud. And in a supply chain, in a supply chain enterprises, one also require some specialized solution related to simulations, related to forecasting, and some vendor have expertise in that area. That also require running solution by those vendor, and then companies end up having multiple clouds. So this is the primary reason multi-cloud is evolving. But I believe a company can make a deliberate choice whether they want to have a multi-cloud or they do not want to have a multi-cloud, and they can be very deliberate what kind of a flexibility they want to get from multi-cloud and what kind of a challenge they face, and accordingly they can plan for those challenges.
Awesome. That's pretty relevant, I think, in terms of the enterprise market ecosystem we're seeing right now. So essentially you're saying that customers are looking for a more kind of connected supply chain, right? Cross-functional collaboration between their inner teams and their outer teams, right? And a multi-cloud strategy can kind of bridge that gap between all the functions. Is that a benefit that comes out of this approach?
So it is very important that supply chain is interconnected. Even if in the first iteration, end-to-end supply chain is not interconnected, enterprise should strive to build a connected data set. They should have a very strong data foundation so that teams across the enterprises are using the same data. It is a standard data, it is governed data, as well as they should be able to collaborate and plan on the same data. So strong data foundation is highly recommended. And if they are using solutions which are disparate, and they need to be interconnected and they need to be combined together. So the data foundation is a key to build end-to-end supply chain.
Awesome. Definitely reflecting as a big challenge right now that enterprises are going through. But a data foundation essentially sets them up for that platform in their journey forward, helping them kind of address these challenges in real time. I think you can't really make decisions when you don't have a cross-functional understanding of what's going on within the supply chain. So giving that extra bonus on top that, hey, my finance team knows what's going on, my sales team knows what's going on, we're all able to analyze this data, we all have it centralized and consolidated, we can make more contextual decisions together. So I think that's a very key factor in terms of the way enterprise customers are evolving now in terms of their growth and their path forward. So there's another question I have. So why are organizations primarily in retail, CPG, and manufacturing industries prioritizing the multi-cloud approach for their supply chain? What makes these a little bit more unique in terms of how they look at their supply chains?
So supply chain companies are generally spread across geographies. And then within each geography, there are different vendors that have solution. So many times they end up buying different solution to fill the gaps. That's what happened. But in general, an enterprise can benefit from multi-cloud for a variety of reasons. Like many enterprises should use multi-cloud for disaster recovery scenario. So they can be deliberate that they want to use multi-cloud, and they can determine who is the primary cloud provider. And even if the primary cloud provider have strong SLAs for disaster recovery, it makes sense to have a secondary cloud provider to fulfill the disaster recovery scenario. The other area where companies can benefit from multi-cloud is companies can deliberately plan that who will be the primary cloud provider, and the primary cloud provider should fulfill the need for most of the infrastructure in a cloud. And primary cloud provider probably can also fulfill the need of most of the PaaS scenario, platform as a service scenario, also for the companies. But there will be specialized scenario, specifically in retail, CPG, if company wants to do a lot of simulation work. So the secondary cloud provider can be used for simulated scenario, and then the outcome of the simulated scenario, when it goes to production, they can have a end-to-end application working on a primary cloud provider infrastructure as well as a PaaS solution. So that's how they can benefit with a primary cloud provider and secondary cloud provider. That disaster recovery scenario, specialized scenario where forecasting is required, having multi-cloud also gives them advantage that companies are not locking in for one cloud provider. And they can also validate the things, how it works on a different cloud provider. It also gives them advantage while negotiating the future contract if they are not locked in with one cloud provider. So overall, they get more flexibility in implementing scenario. When a new requirement comes, they can evaluate which cloud provider is better. And they can run innovation scenario on any of the cloud provider and then bring it to the production in a main cloud provider. So it gives them a lot of flexibility. That's the primary advantage. Having said that, flexibility comes at a cost because multi-cloud also brings some complexity. It also requires resources trained in a different cloud environment. So companies should do the right trade-off between flexibility they get versus the complexity they add while going through multi-cloud scenarios.
Yeah, definitely understood, Prashant. Another core use case that we're seeing trigger a lot of initiatives in terms of addressing supply chain challenges is demand sensing, which is by far one of the most important facets of proper supply chain management. So when done correctly, it can share alerts to even the most granular aspects of day-to-day planning and even trigger the impact of long-term initiatives. So how can companies scale outwards with the multi-cloud approach to strengthen their demand sensing capabilities?
Yes, so demand sensing, companies historically have used their internal data set. And when companies use single cloud provider, they can have all their data set on that cloud provider. But demand sensing can benefit a lot when companies also use public data sets available as well as the licensed data set available. And this is the area companies should build a system that easily combine their internal data set as well as external data set. And to do that, they need to be able to integrate very well with variety of data set, which is whether it is an image data set, text data set, or the streaming coming it from the, or the signal coming from the real-time system. So having a multi-cloud approach enable them to bring data from one environment and able to do forecast combined with other environment and able to do it. For example, if some companies have data in SAP and Oracle, and they are getting public data set on Google Trends or Google Analytics, and they are also getting some licensed data set from third-party vendors, they should be able to get their internal data and combine with the licensed data as well as the public data. And then on top of that, they should be able to run the future forecasting in a platform that or on a cloud platform that allows them to do forecasting at a scale. And many of the primary cloud providers like Google Cloud provide such capability, and then they should be able to bring data back where their original application was. So in this kind of a demand sensing scenario, having a architecture that enable them to integrate a different cloud provider helps, because the key goal is they should be able to combine raw signal from variety of sources, and they should be able to run complex algorithm onto a platform that has a higher scalability, and then they should be able to bring the forecast back to their original enterprise system.
Got it. So essentially it's bringing the broaden visibility down into granular aspects, right? You're having the blending of internal, external, and third-party data to really get the depth of understanding into your business operations. So demand sensing, having such a high impact on the supply chain, I mean, it can either make or break your operations for the next coming quarters. Having that understanding that, okay, this is giving me that full rounded understanding of the ecosystem I'm working in, the triggers, the supply, the procurement, the planning, all of the different stages are highly dependent on this one facet of the supply chain, right? And having that blend of internal, external, and third-party data on your multi-cloud platform, giving you the primary and secondary cloud as a backup, you're really able to understand your supply chain with more depth. Is that correct?
Yes.
See what you're saying?
Yes.
Exactly. Got it. Okay, so to get back to Pluto 7, how are we looking ahead with our partnerships with Google Cloud, SAP, AWS, Azure, and Oracle, to name a few? And exactly how does our solution planning in a box create synergy within the varied cloud environments?
Yeah, so as I said, for an enterprise, multi-cloud brings additional flexibility, but it also adds a lot of complexity. That if a company is using a cloud A, and then if they're buying a solution on cloud B, they need to handle the integration challenge. So the strategy we have approached at Pluto 7 is we have built a planning in a box solution, and we have used the most efficient component on different cloud provider. So if an enterprise is using GCP or Azure, we have a planning in a box on GCP and Azure. So our planning in a box doesn't require additional integration. So basically, we have solved this multi-cloud challenge upfront. That we have already rebuilt planning in a box onto different cloud provider. Also, if companies are using SAP and Oracle or other system, we have also set up connectors and capabilities where we can seamlessly integrate with this, and we can do most of the work in an environment where customer enterprises are already using. If the data needs to be brought in and needs to run at scale, we can run it on a primary cloud provider, which can be GCP, Azure, AWS, etc.
I understand. So is planning in a box serving as like a bridge and then an insights layer on top? Is this essentially what planning in a box serves for a customer?
Yep. Planning in a box enable a customer to build intelligent supply chain. They using their data, they can collaborate together, they can make decisions together, and it has a variety of algorithm for the forecasting and planning. So that's how planning in a box is built, and we have rebuilt it for multiple different cloud, so that if our customers are on cloud A or cloud B, our planning in a box can work with the primary cloud provider they have. But at the same time, if they have data in the system like SAP and Oracle application, it can also integrate with those applications.
Got it. So what do you propose as sort of a path forward for customers? They're looking to onboard onto the solution. And I mean, it's a very broad question, of course, but in terms of their growth plan, let's say they're on Google Cloud right now, that's their primary cloud provider. Later down the line, they'd like to add Azure and AWS just to broaden their operational, their scale. How does Pluto 7 accommodate that in their growth forward based on their unique goals, metrics, et cetera, like that?
So we have tried to make this thing easy for customer. We have built 5-click installer that deploy planning in a box into customer cloud environment, and customer can choose whether it is a GCP or Azure. If they are using GCP, they give their GCP project detail. If they are using, they give their Azure project detail. And if they want to switch from one to another, that is also possible, but we do not see customer switching. So depending upon architecture customers are using, whether it is on GCP or whether it is on Azure, they simply select that environment in a planning in a box. And our few click solution has pre-built architecture on GCP PaaS solution as well as on Azure PaaS solution. After few clicks, our planning in a box get deployed with their into their GCP or Azure environment, and then it basically integrate well with the customer GCP or Azure environment.
So thank you so much, Prashant. I think that did give everybody a very holistic understanding of their path in terms of their unique goals, how Pluto 7 exactly accommodates that within their hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environment. So just to finally recap, what are 3 takeaways for our viewers in understanding the need for their multi-cloud strategy? And so what can they also begin to do to start their journey forward?
For the multi-cloud, my main advice is the company should plan for it. It should not happen in an ad hoc manner. They should make a deliberate decision whether they want to use multi-cloud or not. And once leaders decide that they want to use multi-cloud, they should be even more deliberate in calling it out. What will be their primary cloud provider and what will be their secondary cloud provider, and what role primary cloud provider will play and what role secondary cloud provider will play. So using this, they can benefit from the flexibility multi-cloud bring, but they can also control the additional cost as well as additional complexity multi-cloud will bring in. And as they see more and more progress in secondary cloud provider, they can enable many of their experimentation, development, forecasting scenarios on a secondary cloud provider, and they can run well-governed production system on a multi-cloud provider. Disaster recovery is another area where they can rely on the secondary cloud provider, and they need to ensure that as they build multi-cloud environment, they need to continue to update their governance mechanism to ensure that their architecture, their data remains in a well-governed environment. And then resources is another challenge. They need to ensure that the resources are trained on different cloud environment, but once their resources are trained, they will be able to quickly determine that which cloud is suitable for what kind of scenarios and how they can distribute the workload across the 2 cloud environment. So that's how they can bring a trade-off between flexibility as well as complexity.
Interesting. So I think essentially it's bringing the best of all the clouds into one, right? It's up to you in terms of your long-term goals. It's up to you in terms of your day-to-day operations, and orchestrating all of that within a multi-cloud, having a secondary cloud as well as primary cloud, and focusing on their own roles to play is very key in terms of addressing supply chain challenges now. And I think enterprise customers, corporate customers, SMB customers are really keen on building a platform like this, because in order for them to make decisions that obviously benefit their end customer, they're keeping their customer satisfaction high, they have to start here, at least in terms of long-term initiatives, right? This is making them more resilient. It's helping them kind of fight through any disasters. It's also giving them granular details in terms of, what their customer sentiment is, what are they understanding is important and priority in terms of inventory, stocking shelves, different things like that, really keeping them at the top in terms of how they're managing their supply chain. So I believe it's going to bring a lot of ease in terms of how supply chains start to function. And if supply chain executives, demand planners, and everybody under that umbrella start to get into the flow of using a solution like this, it will ultimately become their platform in terms of addressing change and innovation as well. So if you would like to add any final comments, Prashant, otherwise we've had a really great conversation.
Yeah, so once a company start using multi-cloud in a right manner, they will have a process and framework set up to bring solution from additional cloud provider and then integrating its data with the enterprise data they have. And then they can continue to work with variety of solution and integrate that. And it also gives them a lot of flexibility in negotiation when they are working with cloud vendors and they're not locking in with one cloud provider. So there are a variety of benefit company gets.
Awesome. So you guys heard it here first. Prashant, thank you again for bringing your expertise and your perspective on this new concept that's coming to the market. And we would love to hear more from you. So if anybody would like to follow Prashant on LinkedIn, we're also constantly updating our information in terms of multi-cloud and building this sort of platform out for customers across industries on our LinkedIn as well, Pluto 7 Inc. And if you'd like to follow us there, otherwise, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Prashant, and thank you for the audience for joining us as well. We look forward to seeing you in our next conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for hosting it. Thanks a lot.